Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trick Before. This time, progress. Yeah, we're making progress through all of the Trek. But this is very specific progress. Deep Space Nine progress. Make some progress with us. Sign up, patreon.com/IBD, support the network. We got a long way to progress. So sign up there, patreon.com/IBD. Very easy to help us progress, to help you progress. Right now, we're going to do progress. DS9 progress on It's All Been Trick Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. Some of your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
Jimmy-Jerome, we're down Keith again, 2 weeks in a row. Where is he? I mean, I think we're making progress on finding out, but we'll get back to you on that next week. Let's talk Deep Space Nine progress. First impressions.
I like the B-plot better. I like Brian Keith, great character actor, good actor, longtime actor, but I just do not care for that storyline of, I'm not leaving where I am, blah, blah. Maybe it's because dealing with my elderly mother doing the same thing for the last several years. I soured on that storyline real quick, even with Kira, who I love a lot. I just thought there could have been more variation there. I just felt like it was very circular. Like, I thought it was the same scene many times in a row. But I also really enjoyed the whole Little Rascals Nage thing going on. That I enjoyed a lot. I may have a soft spot for those guys and their antics, but I wanted more of that. So, somewhere in the middle, because like I said, I do like Brian Keith, and there were elements there, and also, I guess I'm getting way ahead of myself on a first impression, but maybe this is me preferring progress. I want to see more futuristic worlds and not these rustic worlds. And maybe that's a bias on me as well. Yeah, so overall, it was okay.
If you have Patreon and you can see my face while Steven was talking, you'll know that I disagree completely. The Jake and Nog plot was fine. I didn't dislike it. It was what it was. It was a fun little B story. I loved the A story. Absolutely. I would disagree it was the same every scene because of the layers those two actors were putting in it. I thought it was two fantastic actors doing a two-man show in the middle of everything else that was happening. And their reasons, it wasn't just because he was old, the reasons they get into with the war and everything, and when he drops the stubbornness back on her of how she is a lot like him, and her having to make that moral decision weighed against her duty, I found very powerful. I do think this isn't the best Kira episode this season. That one's still to come. There's a really, really strong. My favorite episode of season 1 is a Kira-led episode at the end of the season, and we're not there yet. But man, I mean, we're not to the rank. We're not ready to rank yet, but I would start at the top. I think this is a top-notch episode. I really loved it. This is an episode I would say, if I'm complaining about how bad season 1 is, you pull this out and say, yeah, but look at this episode. And I'd be like, oh, okay.
I clearly cashed out early. And was he's got a lot of work to do when he comes back.
I got a lot of work to do on the rankings, but let's kind of talk through this and see if either one of us changes the other one's mind.
Well, hey, last week you definitely made me drop down
somewhat closer.
Even if I felt as good about it at the beginning, I probably would have ranked it about the same place. But anyway, that was last week. That was then. This is now.
Okay.
But anyway.
Well, we start out with Quark yelling at Rom, I'm going to take half your paycheck for 6 years. I'm pretty sure they don't follow up on that in the rest of the series. But Nog has the business sense, which surprises me a little bit based on the directions Nog goes later, but then in some ways doesn't surprise me because he's got to be smart to get where he gets. And that business sense of him picking up on things early on and kind of kicking it off. Although I will say Nog's kind of inconsistent in this episode, and I felt like he kind of lost his business sense at one point, and Jake had to remind him of business sense. But we'll get to that part.
Yeah, well, and I think you bring up a good point, which is I felt like earlier in the season that obviously they're still figuring out all the characters, but that he was kind of the dumb kid or the guy getting Jake into trouble. And I love that it's developing more into obviously they're good friends, and that maybe he isn't. Maybe he's just misunderstood kind of a thing or whatever. I mean, not that's overstating it for sure, but I like that he's becoming a little more smarter or business savvy, however you want to term that. Yeah.
I think he's a product of his environment, but I think through his friendship with Jake, he's learning that he doesn't have to be limited by that environment. And I don't know that we're really seeing that here, but what I liked about the plot with the two of them here is I think you're right. I mean, we've seen Jake rubbing off on Nog going to school and paying attention. And here we're seeing Nog rub off on Jake a bit and seeing some of the good qualities of Nog. Sure. I mean, not that the whole scheme is good quality, but we can see his intelligence. We can see his savvy in certain parts. And he's not hurting anyone. And maybe that's not his whatever. But I don't know. I thought there was a lot to like about Nog here. Guest star Aaron Eisenberg. We won't go over him again because he's in so many episodes. We can't go over his credits every single time.
Yeah, not nice.
R.I.P. Aaron Eisenberg. Let's just go through all our notes on them first, and then we'll come back and do the Kira plot. Quark has yamak sauce. He wants to get rid of that's going to go to waste. So they trade it for self-stealing stem bolts because they can't sell it. Which I remember the term self-stealing stem bolts. I guess I remember this episode more than I thought I would. But the self-stealing symbols just seemed like a fun thing, but the whole thing where O'Brien comes in, he's like, I've never seen one. I don't use them. It's just so good. Because these two kids thought they were setting out a treasure trove. And then it's like, nah, these are probably worthless too. Oh, Jake has to encourage Nog for the trade, which that bothers me a little bit because I get that Nog values latinum over other materials. Right. But if you make a good trade that can lead to greater profit, that's got to be one of the Ferengi rules of acquisition, right? Right. So that bothered me a little bit that he had to trade it. But just that whole thing with O'Brien and just the way he plays it was so good. Except the only thing that bothered me about that scene was the whole thing was talking to O'Brien about them was to ask him what they were because they didn't know what they were and he thought he might know. They don't have Google in the 24th century. Right. Yeah. That even if you couldn't invent in the early 90s when this was written, the internet was around. Did they have search engines? I feel like that's a search engine is something that you should have been able to see coming. So this is mid 93. Yeah, because I know the first time I remember getting on a search engine was 1990 was the first search engine called Archie. So I will say, looking at a short history of the internet, in 1993, there were only 130 websites. So they would not have been search engines. I mean, there was a search engine, but that would not have been something people were using in 1993. But by 1996, there were over 100,000 websites. Yeah. And Netscape Navigator was popular by 95, and that's when you started to see search engines. So, yes, technically there was a search engine at this time. I just feel like that's something that should have been obvious.
Seems like, it seemed.
But maybe that's a retrospect. Maybe that's like, you know? I remember. Or somebody in 93 said, hey, they're going to be this thing called search engines where we can look up answers. Like, that's never going to happen.
I definitely wouldn't have foreseen it that well because I remember when Entertainment Weekly started having a web or internet section of the magazine, and I was like, and I would read that cover to cover. This is what I did in the 90s. And I was like, why do I need to read this? I would read it, but I was like, this is not going to last. So clearly,
internet fad.
Yeah, clearly, do not listen to me about what's going to happen in the future.
No,
do not. But
I did appreciate how Jake was like, well, first we need to get the yamak sauce from Quark, and then Quark's like, just throw it away. I don't even care. Quark calls Nog a good boy at that in that scene, I guess, for saying he'll take care of it and throw it away for him. Yeah. But I feel like we didn't get to see much of the follow-up at the end, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I feel like were Quark knowing that Nog was tricking him out of this sauce to make a deal, Quark would have been even more proud of him and thought he was an even better boy.
Yes, yeah. What do we ever see what yamak sauce looks like?
In my head, I don't know why. In my head, I pictured it like teriyaki sauce. I do also know Cardassians have a heavy fish diet, so it could be some kind of fish sauce.
Yeah, I also thought of it as either soy sauce or like kind of the base for Indian food, like tiki, or I don't even know if that's the sauce, but kind of an Indian or an Asian kind of sauce.
Check in Memory Alpha and Memory Beta to see if we have an explanation. Memory Alpha just says it was considered a Cardassian delicacy, but was also later adapted to Terran food and was enjoyable served on asparagus or sand peas. So a sauce you could eat on asparagus and peas. I feel like the Asian sauces we're thinking of are probably along the right lines.
Yeah, anything would make those two foods better.
In my mind, I had an idea of what it was immediately. I don't know.
I also thought it came in little packets like soy sauce.
Yeah,
in my brain,
I was thinking bottles, but it could be packets. It could be. I'll give you that one.
I enjoyed the story. at one point they're talking to somebody over the radio or whatever. It's Odo, isn't it?
No.
It's not Renee Aubernois.
Oh, you think it was the voice of Renee Aubernois?
So I thought Odo was on to him, but that never really comes to fruition.
I don't think it was. I didn't
investigate that, but I was sure. I was like, oh, okay, because I thought he was doing his own sting on them.
I mean, that would have been great. That never occurred to me. I'm looking at Memory Alpha to see if there's a cast listing for that character. Because
then soon after, he's like the next scene, he's with them and he's questioning them about it. I'm like, oh, okay, he's gonna get him. But
no, I mean, they didn't actually do anything illegal, so I don't know what he'd get him for. But yeah, Memory Alpha nor IMDb list list who did the voice.
Interesting.
While talking to you, I can't multitask well enough to do a deep dive on it, but
sure.
It could have been Renee Aubernois. I didn't think it was. I did appreciate that they had the thought to go to the original customer because they had heard that, oh, well, he just can't afford it. We can give him at a discount. It did bother me that Nog was just dead set on 5 bars of Latinum as a starting point. I feel like he should have tried to figure out what the value was and offer him a 50% discount. Because if Nog was really being a good Ferengi with good business sense, you'd try to get as much as you could for it, whereas Nog just seemed to care about getting a couple bars of Latinum, and other than that, he couldn't care less.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things of in his brain, Latinum, that's the thing, because he's heard that or whatever. But
sure.
There's that documentary right now, I think on Netflix or whatever, about the guy who turned all his free Pepsi points into a jet plane or whatever it is. But that's where I thought this was going, so... But I still enjoyed it, though.
You mentioned the call. I thought that was pretty smart because it seemed to me that they were faking the bad connection on purpose so that their seller wouldn't know they were kids. Right. Which I thought was pretty smart.
Yeah.
I did really have a problem with Nog being upset about trading it for land and just kept calling it dirt because I don't know what Bajor is like, but on Earth, land's pretty valuable in a lot of places.
Right.
So you do need to figure out where the land is to know how much it's worth, but... whatever that number was that he was offering, I feel like that was probably a pretty good deal.
Right. And then there's also the aspect of people not knowing who these... It was called Noje, right? Is that what they kept calling it? Noje?
I thought they called it Noje because it's Nog and Jake, but they took out the last letters.
Right.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that aspect as well.
Yeah, because they were scrambling, and of course kids think of that. And then the climax, though, was a little too convenient, and this is where I did think for a second maybe Odo was onto them. Which backs up your theory. When Odo and Quark have that conversation that they can easily overhear about the land, I was like, oh, they're just fishing for him now. But they weren't.
That's what I thought, too.
And I would have been disappointed had I not been so happy with the culmination of Nog running up to Quark and being like, hey, uncle, I'm busy. No, it's important. Fine. Just, what is it real quick? And I appreciate that Quark respects Nog enough to give him a minute because... I'm not sure in these early episodes that's established that Quark would even give him a minute, because he's more important than his nephew, but I like that he gave him a minute. And then the look on Quark's face when he no, was such a great payoff that even my couple little quibbles with the convenience of the climax, I was like, it's still fun. Mm-hmm. Although, again, Nog's fine with 5 bars. He offers to sell to Quark with 5 bars, and I feel like when Quark realizes it's probably worth a hell of a lot more than that, he'll be really upset with his nephew for giving him 5 bars. Because, his nephew reflects on him. So going backwards a bit, where the premise is presented that they're going to crack open a moon to provide enough energy for thousands of homes, and they don't have to destroy the moon to do it. If they're willing to wait a year to start getting energy, but they need it now. And that environmental impact, I mean, it's like strip mining, right? Mm-hmm. It's convenience for convenience sake. It's to save money and profit. And yet, considering they just came out of this horrible military occupation of decades, it's hard to get upset with them in the way I would get upset with a corporation in America for doing that now, because they're in extreme circumstances. Yeah. Even though it just kills me to think they're going to destroy this moon. I assume it's not a Bajoran moon because that screw up tides and things. I assume it's a moon at a nearby planet that nobody's on. Yeah. But man, that just sucks that they're willing to do that. And that's a sign of how desperate they are, I think, that they're willing to do that. Yeah. Dax and Kira fly out. And they have a delightful conversation where Dax is talking about Morn and how the 7 or 8 hairs on his head make him kind of cute.
Yeah, I did find that amusing, and I wrote, even these two can't have a Bechdel conversation.
Right? Because as soon as they stopped talking about Morn, it would have passed the Bechdel test the rest of their conversation. But again, I can't get upset because referencing Morn is fun. Showing that Dax has exotic tastes is a good establishing point for a character. I mean, I think we learn a lot that her centuries of experience give her a different perspective than a lot of the other characters on things. And so, I mean, like, she enjoys being around Quark. You can tell, even if she's not falling for his crap. Yeah. And so I appreciated that aspect in. So Kira beams down and is immediately caught with pitchforks and stuff because they don't like uniforms. Real creepy. Almost turned into the do-do-do-do-do-do-do. You almost expected the banjo to play. Right? Because they seem like just very primitive farmers or hillbillies.
Yeah, and again...
Especially with the guy kept talking about, oh, you're halfway pretty. Oh, your eyes, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. It was super creepy.
Yeah. I did not care for that, for sure. But
I did not either until Kira realized why he was doing it. The constant compliments early on, which he dropped as soon as she called him on it, were because he was just trying to tick her off so she'd leave. And so then I was like, oh, this is intelligent. He's not being creepy to be creepy. He's being creepy because he's trying to run her off. And I really... While that's not the approach I would take, I certainly forgave him immediately for that approach, especially because he never repeated it.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I still didn't like it, but it makes sense.
Comments made me uncomfortable, but the explanation for it from a storytelling perspective was smart.
I wanted there to be more people there that like, we're not leaving. But maybe that's more about how sad and desperate these people were.
I feel like we only needed one. I don't think we even needed the other two. They seemed extraneous. Although I want to talk about the other two actors.
The problem,
because the other two actors have credits. Like these were not throwaway actors. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about them, and then we'll get back to the plot. Even though the characters really were unnecessary, other than for one little bit later on. Toran was played by Michael Bofshiver, who's best known for A Dog's Purpose, United 93. Breaking Bad and the Breaking Bad movie as Mr. Pinkman, and more recently he's been in the show Barry. So he's got 82 credits on IMDb. In terms of the Star Trek, he plays Alien Number 1 in an episode of Next Gen we haven't seen yet, and then this. So only 2 Trek credits. An episode of Next Gen this season, so coming up soon. And he did play an Excelsior engineer in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. So this wasn't his first Trek. And then the woman,
she looks really familiar too.
Yeah, her name in here is Keena, played by Annie O'Donnell, who's best known for Black Sheep, Transformers: Dark Side of the Moon, The Artist, the Oscar-winning movie, and Blast from the Past with Brendan Fraser. She has 116 credits.
Yeah.
She is still active as near as I can tell. Her last credit was 2018. She was in a movie a short called Admission. She was recently guest starred in Fresh Off the Boat, Mike and Molly, The Big Bang Theory. Okay. She was in the movie Jersey Boys in 2014. She did episode of The Mindy Project, Children's Hospital. So she's got quite a few credits.
I've definitely seen her.
This is her only Star Trek credit. But she's been around since around 1980. It looks like her credits go back. She did some episodes of Duke of Hazzard and Mama's Family back then.
Wow. So,
yeah, like they got some good actors to play those parts that weren't that important.
And I guess the story about them having their tongues cut out or whatever.
That was brutal.
That's the reason to have them around.
Well, and I did think that for a while, part of Molebeck's motivation was going to be for them, but it didn't end up being for them.
No.
And that made me a little sad, and that's why I think they're a little extraneous. But his story about he escaped from the Cardassians. This was his sanctuary when his world was being destroyed and enslaved, that this is where he went to stay safe and feel safe. And they were asking him to go back to the place he fled from, where all this horror took place that he witnessed. And I know he can pick the opposite side of the planet and whatever, but for him in this situation, given what he went through and how he made his way here and found some semblance of peace, I know he's been out here for decades, but that to me was really affecting and a really strong motivator. And I think Kira understood that immediately, because even her first argument was, Bajor will be fine, really, which is not very persuasive. Later she's like, it's not going to be that bad. But it is that bad. Bajor's in shambles right now. It's really not a good place. What he's got going on this moon, is better than what she's asking him to go back to. And I think you need to think about that and the war situation. This is a refugee.
Yeah.
And you're asking him to go back to his war-torn land.
Yeah.
I think when you start to get the weight of what they've gone through, and then what that means to Kira, when he asks her, like, how did she win the war? And she said, we hung on like fanatics. And he's like, what do you think I'm doing right now, essentially? The way they connect and the level they connect on, and the fact that she's still conflicted, that doesn't completely get her to his side. Like, she respects him and cares about him, but she is still willing to evacuate him. And I don't think it's just for her career. I really don't. I think that would make it very superficial. She's forcing these people out against her judgment. And she understands what they've been through. And that, to me, is really powerful stuff. Whereas every scene between the two of them, it's that rock in the heart. It's two really, really stubborn people coming together. And she's got empathy. He doesn't for the other side. Man.
Well, I mean, he keeps saying, if I leave here, I'll die. And I wrote, you're no merged head for one thing, which she could have left. But obviously, our guy, Zephram Cochrane, couldn't. But he's going to die if he stays, right?
Yes. And he's willing. I think he is completely at peace I think he even says as much at one point. Break apart the moon. I'm just staying here. If it kills me, it kills me.
He won't literally die if he leaves there, but he's saying, I'm not going to make it that long.
I get it. Again, because of what he went through before he got there. And that this was the place he escaped to. And this is the only place he's felt safe and has felt like he has a life. I mean, every time we see the colonists who won't evacuate,
right?
I am not very sympathetic. But I think knowing what the Bajorans went through, and I know the series hasn't really given us a great look on that yet, so maybe my opinion is influenced by the novelizations that get into it deeper or future talk about it. I don't think we spend like episodes delving into what they went through. But I feel like I've got a deep enough understanding from the extended universe of novelizations and stuff that I'm like, they really went through a lot. So to me, here's an analogy you might be able to connect with. You're a Jewish person living in Germany in the 1930s. Or growing up, you're in your 20s in the 1930s. You're an adult or 30s. You're an adult. It is brutal. People are being murdered around you. You escape to a nice place. Probably not the United States because we only took in so many refugees. You escape to a nice place of the world where you build a life and a home with these scars of your past and this trauma that you will never get over. That is constantly haunting you. And then somebody says, "Hey, we're bulldozing this place. You have to go back to Germany." Yeah, that's the way I see it. But that's why I found this story so powerful. I drew those parallels with human history and with the larger events that we learned a little bit about in The Next Generation with Ro and are starting to learn about in Deep Space Nine.
Sure.
I did enjoy his goofy story about the two-headed Mongolian that always disagreed with himself. That was just fun. I want to see him Algor.
Yeah, it's fair.
The next scene in my note order, anyway, is when Kira comes with armed guards to evacuate them. And Torin is shot.
Yeah.
And she's yelling at them like, don't shit stop. Oh God. That's so rough to me. Watching them do that because they're no better than the Cardassians. And once they pull those weapons, how is Mullibuck going to trust them? He's only going to see it as more of the same that he escaped from. It
got real violent real fast too. Like I thought that was like we've had surprise deaths or whatever violence before, but I was like, wait a minute, what is going on here? So that makes sense.
They didn't. Neither Torin nor Mullibuck died, but they were both shot or injured. Yeah. I do want to ask, why were there no doctors closer than Bashir? That Bashir had to come, but that's like my only gripe for this entire episode. So yeah, it was a calculated move on Kira's part, but I also think at that point she was not deep enough yet into him and his plight to make that mistake, because I think once she showed up with the guns, she lost. It was, again, he's now going to associate with her with the oppressor, with the same thing he escaped from. I know on a personal level they connect, but the uniform she wears and the organization she represents, even if he forgives her personal involvement in it, is now that in his head even more solidly than it was before. And I think it was already that in his head by forcing him to leave. Again, they're bulldozing your home. They're going to send you back to Germany, but you think these people are connected to the Nazis. These were Nazi sympathizers. They're no better. Telling you have to go back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to explain why I was so affected.
No, that's a good explanation. None of that got to me.
Yeah,
I didn't feel that.
I know.
So, but
I don't know if I'm making you see it differently or if I'm just spouting,
a little bit. But I felt like I'd seen it before, and I didn't want to see it again. There were still some scenes that when Cisco comes down and talks to Kira. Not a visitor is great, and like you said, Brian Keith's really good too. And like I said, he's a guy who's always been great in TV.
Well, so we haven't talked about that. Malabak, played by Brian Keith. He's best known for being the father in Parent Trap, the original. Forgot that was him. Because I love that movie. Young Guns, The Wind and the Lion, Reflections in a Golden... I can't read the rest of that title. IMDb's not showing me. 165 credits.
He was either Hardcastle or McCormick. I think he was Hardcastle, but I could have that backwards.
In Hardcastle McCormick, he was Hardcastle, yes. Judge Milton C. Hardcastle for 67 episodes in the 80s.
Yeah.
It will probably not surprise you at all that one of his last credits was voicing a character in Spider-Man the Animated Series, and the character he voiced. Just take a wild guess. Who do you think he voiced in Spider-Man?
Which series? Uncle Ben.
Of course. Of course.
That's great.
This is his only Trek credit, unfortunately, in my opinion. In fact, my alternate episode is I would have loved if this character actually did reoccur. I would have liked to have Kira to check back in on him later as a mentor figure.
This will demonstrate even further how far apart we are on this. Mine is he leaves and realizes I should have left a long time ago.
I'm not saying he shouldn't leave. I'm really not.
I know.
And the fact that the price of making him leave is you're just going to wait slightly longer for energy that you're going to get anyway.
Well,
ticks me off at the Bajoran minister. I get they're in an emergency situation. 12 months could be important. It could mean lives. It really could. But it's just such a hard situation to me. I think the other thing that we're not gotten into yet is the Maquis. You haven't heard that term yet on Star Trek, right? The Maquis?
I don't think so.
Okay. We're going to get into them. I don't know if I think they show up on Next Gen before it ends, but a lot on DS9 and Voyager. The Maquis, when the Federation made the treaty with the Cardassians, they got them to pull out of Bajor, they drew a new territory line, and they ceded a certain number of planets to the Cardassians because they had to come up with a truce, right? So there's negotiation, and you win some, you lose some. And so the Maquis are essentially freedom fighters that lived on the planets that the Federation used to control or that were independent that they ceded to the Cardassians. Like, we're the victims of your truce. And that's going to be a major thing in Voyager. But also play into DS9 pretty heavily going forward as well. Okay. And I think that idea has to come out of this episode because it's a similar concept of being forced off the planet for the greater good, but not taking into account the personal cost. There are a lot of people in this universe that I think can justifiably say Starfleet are the bad guys at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's we've been starting to get there a little bit in TNG, or at least we have, even if the people in TNG haven't.
Sure.
And, in TOS, you're just still in the 60s. There's still the idea, well, we're doing the right thing. There's a little bit occasionally of maybe they're not doing the right thing. Speaking of TOS, I feel like Malabak and his, reluctance isn't even a strong enough word to leave. If I leave, I'll die. As Scotty said in Star Trek II Wrath of Khan, he's dead already. So, which may go to one kind of your point of like, this guy is so scarred that he's pretty much dead anyway. I mean, he's still living his sedentary lifestyle or whatever, and that kind of thing. It's not a Shane story or whatever. The guy becomes a farmer, or I guess Unforgiven or whatever. The guy who's like, I used to be in that game. Now I just want to be a farmer. But I mean, I guess it is. Yeah. But he's not getting pulled back into it or whatever. But I feel like, and again, I think that's obviously the title is Progress. So that I think it alludes to that too. And they make progress through the episode and all that stuff. But
I think it's that thing of like, what is the cost of progress, right?
Sure.
That there is a cost to progress. And while it's good overall, it's not good for everyone.
Yeah, and you are selling me on the Scars of War thing, because I feel like he is so damaged. That's part of the reason I don't like him that much.
He's so when Cisco says you're causing me trouble, he said good,
Yeah,
that's what I want to do. That Cisco scene, man, another thing that's powerful, because Kira's staying and finishing the oven in front of Cisco, which is a sign to Malbec, a sign to Cisco. Cisco is buying her time, and Cisco's impassioned plea of, I like you, I respect you, I thought you were hostile and arrogant. You're not. She is hostile, but she's not arrogant. Like, she fought to be here. Oh, God. Trying to govern after you win the war?
Yeah.
And this is where DS9, I think, has a leg up on the other Star Trek series, because we've talked about that. We've seen this. You've seen the story before with other colonists, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're just going from planet to planet. We check in, we leave.
Right.
We sit at Bajor for the next 7 years.
That's true. Yeah.
So all this stuff accumulates and builds on top of one another, and that's where it gets powerful to me. Like, what happens when the Enterprise moves on next week? We get to see that now.
Yeah, that scene was great. That was my favorite part of this entire storyline, was when Cisco comes down and
so good. So good.
And the delivery is great. And
I didn't totally feel it was earned yet. I wish it had been earned a little more.
Yeah.
If this came a little late in the series, or we saw a little more Cisco Kira before now.
As far as how much he's like, I'm giving you this rope.
No, I think he could give her the rope from day one, because he has to make inroads with the Bajorans, and he needs her on his side. Mm-hmm. I think it feels more than that. It feels personal, of like, I like and respect you. I was wrong about you. You've proven yourself to me. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we've seen that yet. We have a little bit, but I don't know we've seen it to the level he's saying it now.
And I guess for me, not having the history with it like you do, I just filled in the blanks, like, okay, this happened, or whatever, Yeah.
Sure. But, the oven's finished, and Kira blows it up and burns down the cottage to save his life, because he says, I'm not leaving while that cottage is standing. Yeah. And I think she planned to blow up the oven. I don't think she planned to burn down the cottage. I think in that moment, she was like, okay, we finished this. Maybe this was the reason you were hanging on. I'm not sure. Because it could have been. And that oven looked pretty cool. I want to say I liked the design of the oven. I liked what they were doing with it.
I was surprised and impressed that they stuck with it, almost like a Family Guy bit. It's like, nope, they're going to keep working on this. That
oven was so meaningful and metaphorical to me. I loved that oven being part of the story, but I'm just talking about from a design perspective. I thought it was cool. I want one of those.
I agree.
And then Malbec asked Kira to kill him rather than make him leave. Like, that to me, you asked, if he leaves, does he really die, or is he exaggerating? He thinks in this moment he really dies. Of a broken heart, of despair, of giving up on life. I don't know, but he thinks he's really dead at this point, and I understand that.
Yeah.
He wasn't strong enough to stay as a freedom fighter. He ran and hid.
Right.
He's not the personality that's going to go back and fight to restore the planet. She is. And that is the difference between them. She is fighting to restore the planet, and he has gave up and left. I do want to touch on two other guest stars. Not that their characters are important here, but because of their other credits later. Daniel Riordan plays First Guard. I assume that's the person that shot the people on the planet. Right. He's best known for Jingle All the Way, playing Turbo Man, Dreamgirls as an LA DJ, Ed Wood, pilot and strapping young man, and the film Amsterdam. He will also play a version of Duras in Star Trek Enterprise, like a younger Duras, the Klingon in 2 episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. So we get a little bit. He was previously on a first season episode of The Next Generation, Coming of Age. He played Rondon. I don't even remember him from that. But the other one I want to touch on is the Lesipian captain, the guy that trades the Yamuk sauce for stem bolts.
Oh, yeah.
Played by Nicholas Worth. He's best known for Dark Man, Heartbreak Ridge, No Way Out, Don't Answer the Phone. Haven't heard any of those. But he's going to do two episodes of Voyager as Lonzak Chaotica's adjunct. Chaotica, I think you're going to enjoy the Chaotica episodes. It's a holodeck program, but it's like a black and white sci-fi Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon type program with like over-the-top, outrageous sci-fi trope villain stuff. He also does another episode. DS9 is another character, but
I was sure
Chaotica's great.
Better than I did when I looked him up because the voice seemed very recognizable.
Mm-hmm. Progress was directed by Leslie Landau, written by Peter Allen Fields, who's best known for writing Next Gen, DS9, McCloud, and The $6 Million Man. His Next Gen credits, he wrote 3 episodes. He wrote Half a Life in Season 4, and in Season 5, he wrote Cost of Living and The Inner Light. I can see the parallels with The Inner Light, the Picard,
for sure.
Living a Life. He will write 10 episodes of Next Gen. This is actually his second. He did Story by and Tell by Dax, where Dax was accused of murder from a previous host.
Okay.
But he also wrote in Season 1 of DS9 Duet, which is the Kira episode that I count as the best of Season 1, the one that's coming up. So he writes another Kira episode where she's forced to really reckon with where she is and what she's been through, and that's coming up. He'll also write 4 episodes of Season 2. I know at least one of them is pretty good. An episode of Season 5. He wrote my favorite episode of Star Trek ever in Season 6, In the Pale Moonlight.
Okay.
And then he has a story by credit for The Dogs of War, which is one of the final episodes of DS9, near the end of the whole war and everything. Okay. So, yeah, Peter Allen Fields, if I see his name, I'm going to be excited because In the Pale Moonlight, I'm so... And I set my Cisco up with the whiskey glass and the jacket half off to make him look like he's from In the Pale Moonlight. That whole story, I know we were just complaining about Beverly's I was complaining about Beverly's flashback episode last week. In the Pale Moonlight is Cisco telling the story in flashback for the whole episode, but it's really good. It's a Garrick heavy episode too. Gotta have we need more Garrick. Garrick hasn't been around enough yet.
Stories can be told well in flashback. Suspicion was not
just not that one.
Yeah. I just have one fashion note.
Okay.
Kira takes her tunic off.
Yeah.
And I wrote it's the best of times, worst of times. It's a weird outfit.
And is this the first time she's taken the tunic off?
Yeah, as far as I took notice of it for that, and maybe I missed it before. But
if you're just noticing, it's probably the first time. I mean, this won't be the last time, and it always looks like that.
Because I feel like
it's crocheted at the top.
Yeah, that part is really like I'm into the female form part of me was like I can't stop looking at that, and she looks great. Other parts I think don't necessarily do her justice, but So best of times, worst of times, and I look forward to seeing it more. Though that said. So that was my only other note. Like I said, I didn't take a ton of notes, but yeah.
I think so far Kira's my favorite character on DS9.
Yeah,
I mean I love Odo and I love Quark, and I love Cisco. Cisco's my favorite captain. I've said for a long time, but Kira, at least in this rewatch, is my favorite character, and she wasn't originally. Like I forgot. I mean, she's got some great stuff here, but I forgot like just how good she is, and. Whew, I think when I was younger, I think most younger people are more superficial than older people.
Right.
The short hair was a big turnoff for me. It always has been. I've never liked especially that short. Sure. And I think that superficially may have overlooked moments I should not have overlooked of because just character from a personality, like a hair should not matter. It shouldn't, and it doesn't to me now. Yeah. But such a good actress, such meaty stuff they give her. Whew. I mean, this could have been Ro, and I love Michelle Forbes. I think she would have also knocked it out of the park, but God, Nana Visitor does an amazing job.
From the drop, I'm interested in her and the character, obviously.
Her hair does get a little longer late in the series, way late, but only like shoulder length. It never gets, it never really. And in real life, she's always had short hair too.
It's not a Bajoran thing because obviously Ro had more a ton of hair.
Yeah, I think her hair gets like Rose, kind of like shoulder length, or a little bit above. Like not till like season 7 though. Like not till the end.
So we gotta watch
the show.
But yeah, I'm intrigued with her. I think I mentioned that early on.
Yeah. I think I was always more into Dax, and I still love Dax, but man, Kira's awesome. Yeah. Just as a compelling person. I just want to be around her. I want to hear about her. I'm not even, I mean, I date her, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about man, you're fascinating. You deserve all the respect and attention you get. I wanted a Cisco spinoff. Now I would be perfectly happy with a Kira spinoff. Perfectly happy. Just as excited, I think, at this point with a Kira continuation now as I would be with a Cisco continuation.
I am on board with that.
So
that I agree.
Okay. Yeah, I think I can tell already. Keith's gonna have to make some ranking.
Yeah, I think.
But let's get to our other rankings and see how far apart we are. We don't start with the episode ranking. We start with who was shady this week for you?
This isn't a stretch. Quark. I didn't, and this is. It's not that bad, but I did not like the way he grabbed Nog by the ears.
Oh, that you'll see him do that a lot.
Yeah, I don't like it.
You see in the old movies, a teacher grabs a student by an ear. It's kind of like that, except
I don't like that either.
Except their ears are pretty much their testicles. Well, so then you should really not like it.
Yeah, now I'm even more uncomfortable about it. Yeah, I'm staying with.
When I said Toran was the other refugee on the moon, I'm not sure he was.
Oh, okay.
It might have been Baltram. In retrospect, I think I was wrong. I think Baltram was the refugee on the moon, and Toran was the Bajoran minister.
Oh, right.
Who is my annoyance. And this is where I stumbled upon it.
Okay, yeah.
Because I know you're in an emergency, but can you really not give him a year to do it right? Do you have to evacuate him? Let's have that discussion at least. He didn't seem open to the discussion, and that bothered me. I know you're probably like, I've got a million things on my plate. I'm laser focused on this thing. But yeah, I'm going to say Toran is my... I mean, we don't need to get into the other actor because he's only got... Yeah, he doesn't have enough credits to get in.
The bulldozers are coming in either way, right? So...
Yeah, but the bulldozers would destroy the planet one way. The other way, he could stay. Because if they do the thing that's going to take a year to get the energy, he can keep his cottage and he'll be fine. He won't die. Okay. Not just for a year, for indeterminate. Because it's less harmful to the planet. They're not going to release the gases that kill everything. So yeah, Toran, the Bajoran minister, is my annoying or shady character. Because just take a second. He's also my annoyance for the same reason. Again, I understand. I do think I understand his reasons for wanting to be quick, but I just think we needed to see that being conflicted.
Sure. My annoyance is Malabak. So
I also, and we maybe haven't gotten to this in this podcast, I also have a soft spot for old cranky people.
That's fair.
I gravitate towards old cranky women, but I also have a soft spot for old cranky men.
Fair.
So the fact that he was old and cranky, immediately I'm like, I like him. So he's who I'm having a drink with.
All right, that's fair. I am having a Coca-Cola with the Noje team. The Noje team.
Noje Enterprises.
Yes, Noje Enterprises.
Noggin J. I mean, I enjoyed them for the most part in this episode, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
I do long for their plots to get more adult. I feel like the child plots for them is really only season 1, and then they mature pretty fast, and we get a lot of growth. We definitely have adult level plots for them in the later seasons, so they don't stay like this.
Well,
but it's still kind of fun to have the kid energy on board right now.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. I won't begrudge you. Ranking the episode, for me, this is easy. I would put it at number 1 above Emissary. I thought it was that powerful. Again, for all the reasons we've already gone over, so we don't need to go over them again.
Good arguments.
So now it's going to be up to you. Do you want me for your? Because we're going to make Keith decide. But do you want me to start in the middle, towards the bottom, towards the top?
Where should we go? Because I think you've swayed me a little bit this week, also.
Okay. Well, let's start with the other episode written by the same guy, Dax.
All right. What's below and what's above?
Above is Babel.
Okay.
Below is Vortex.
Yeah, that makes me think we're in the right zone for me, at least.
Okay.
I think I'd go below Babel and above
Between Babel and Dax?
Yeah.
So still staying below the storyteller. O'Brien becoming the village storyteller. Ooh. That's what's above Babel.
Wow. All right. Maybe I'm changing my...
I thought there might be a little recency bias because Babel and Dax were both so long ago. I wanted to bring up a more recent episode that's above them.
You know what? I'm gonna stay there, and we'll let Keith.
You're gonna stay between Babel and Dax?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then we are 6 episodes apart this time instead of 3.
Wow.
With fewer episodes to balance.
Yes. Well, we'll see what Keith comes up with.
We will.
I mean, the internet is with you, not with me. But I at least from when I looked, a lot of people are big fans of this episode.
To be fair to you, I have said over and over again that season 1 sucks. And when I think
that's
the
true.
reason why it doesn't, this episode did not cross my mind. And I'd seen it before.
Yeah.
So how much of that is my later thinking about the world this place inhabits versus just taking these like 14 episodes or whatever we've done at face value? I don't know. And I admit right now I can't put myself in your shoes if you've only seen the episodes we've seen and don't have further understanding beyond it. I can't. I don't know if I'd rank it as low as you are or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Next week, Next Generation Rightful Heir. This is an exciting episode. During Worf's, I haven't seen it, but it's got implications for the franchise going forward. Okay. During Worf's crisis of faith on Boreth, Klingon moon that you may remember from Star Trek Discovery.
Oh, right.
Which I know takes place later, but you've seen Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah,
it's the moon where the time crystals where Pike went.
Right.
During Worf's crisis of faith on Boreth, Hollis the Unforgettable makes his promised legendary return.
Huh.
Because he always said he'd be back. You know, he died like millennia ago, but he said he'd return. So this is the second coming of Christ for the Klingons.
I was going to say, this sounds like a biblical episode.
But Klingon leader Gowron challenges his authenticity.
Okay.
Is the rest of the episode description. So is he real? Is he not? I won't answer that, but I will tell you that his Colossus reemergence has lasting implications for the Klingon Empire, even though, and this shocks me to learn this because I was checking it earlier between episodes, this is the only episode of Star Trek that Colossus appears in, other than the original series, the like hologram or whatever of him on the planet. We never see this character again, but so many of the novelizations and the novels include him as a character, and he's mentioned in future episodes. But he's only in this one episode. Shocks me. Anyway, we'll get to Colossus next week. Colossus' second coming of Christ next week. Until then, live long.
That's right. He was in Savage Curtain, so it is a callback to Savage Curtain. Yeah.
It is, and they've mentioned him in Next Gen and DS9 since then. I think that maybe not DS9. They definitely mentioned him in Next Gen since then. Worf told the story of Colossus and his brother fighting and all that.
Yes.
So they just deepened the mythology. Now Colossus comes back to life, essentially. Is it real or is it not?
Which was the same issue in Savage Curtain. A lot of other issues in Savage Curtain. But all right, you got me. I'm intrigued. I'm looking forward to this.
I already know the answer to that question, but I cannot wait for you to find out. And honestly, because I haven't seen this episode, I can't wait to debate how it goes down and what the implications are coming out of it.
Yeah. And now that you've tied a Discovery, now I'll have all that going. So cool.
Until then, live long.
By moving on, making, dare I say it, progress and prosper.
Tell us about your Deep Space Nine episode that you watched. We also are going to make you rank that one because we disagreed on that one as well, but for different reasons and different ranges. We weren't at the bottom for that one.
I don't know why I like the Jake and Nog stories as much as I'm starting to. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it was just... there was something endearing about it, and I was like, okay, I kind of like this bit. It was a nice reprieve from what the other things were going on. I would say out of the gate when Kira was down on the planet, and I'm trying to remember how distracted I might have been during this, but I was immediately like, I not another one of these guys, not another one of these colonists who doesn't want to do this, and they were trying to put, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really on board until maybe somewhere in the dinner scene. There was some anecdote or some bit of the banter. I was like, okay, fine. One of the stories. And I kind of get some of that appeal, but...
So, I will tell you, Stephen liked the Jake and Nog plot as well, and was not thrilled with the Kira. I tried to make a very passionate plea how awesome the Kira plot was. I thought the Jake and Nog was fine. What I compared it to was essentially like this old guy was a Jewish man that escaped Germany just before the Holocaust. Kira lived through the Holocaust and is now telling him, you have to go back to Germany because where you escaped to, we want to get rid of that. And you just have to come home to Germany, and what that would do to his psyche. So I got really into the mental headspace they were in and just how great a burden it was for him to actually go home. I don't think it was exaggerating when he said it would kill him. I think it really, to ask him to go back there was incredible. I said it was the best episode of the season. Steven has it about 6 down.
Yeah,
all right, about that analogy.
Persuasive on both of these. He made me hate the one more than or dislike. I shouldn't say hate. He made me like this more than I initially did, but I still didn't like it as much as him, obviously.
Right. Mm-hmm. He was an escaped prisoner too, wasn't he? He was on a ship. That's what he was saying. At least one of his. So
I was deeply moved and affected by it. Very, very deeply.
I will say that you're reminding me of the part that I had started to like during their banter when they really started to dig into, I guess, the comparisons between where they were, as far as what was the thing he asked her something like, if you were you knew that it was a lost cause, so why did you keep fighting, or how did you win? If it was unwinnable, how did you win? And that thing.
Yes, that was a great moment.
I think one of the other things that kind of redeemed it for me was the very end when she was just like, screw it. Mm-hmm. She had to get to that point where she felt like she had done everything she could do. Mm-hmm. We've played this game. Game is over. I no longer feel like this is reasonable. We've done the project. We're destroying it immediately and we're leaving.
Yeah. Well, and then he said, you have to burn the house down to make me leave. And so she turned around and burned the house down. Most flammable house in history, but yeah.
Well, what he said was, as long as this cottage is still standing,
right,
I will be here. And just kind of setting her up for something, perhaps, but it seemed like he genuinely did not expect her to do that, which was even better.
No, I don't think so either. I think she did save his life, though. I don't know. I really wanted to follow up with them, but of course he's not in any more episodes. So, unfortunately, but yeah.
Well, it killed him as soon as he teleported off that planet.
Yeah,
he was just dead on arrival.
I mean, seriously, he probably died of a broken heart 3 days later or something.
It was actually a car crash.
I think
same thing. Broken heart, car crash. Essentially the same thing.
I would say that I think that was the thing that really turned me off almost at the beginning, was that part of the dilemma where she was sort of accepting that, it probably will kill him if we take him off the planet.
Yeah.
No, it will not.
I mean,
he kind of grow up, and they're going to.
Now, see, that's the argument Steven made, and when I tried to explain just how deep this trauma was,
it doesn't matter.
I sympathized with him fully on this. I really did.
Yeah.
I said he's no Merge Hedgeford.
Oh, now you're really pandering to Keith, Steven.
There's just something about I know.
Okay, so you don't want it to be number 1 for the season, then. But let's see how far down you go. So you're going to say worse than Emissary. What about better or worse than the Negus?
Worse. I think I really liked the Negus thing.
Okay. Better or worse than Battle Lines? Oh.
Why is that high?
We really liked it. It was very emotionally moving. They did it really well.
Huh. I don't remember feeling that way.
Okay.
I would almost put it above that, actually. So what's below?
Okay, great. We'll put it above that. The Passenger. No, but that's about halfway between where Steven and I were, so we'll put it above that. But below that's the Passenger.
I actually like the Passenger more than this, honestly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was. I think I was the outlier on that one.
I think you were. And below that is the Storyteller.
Oh my God!
See, that was so much better than the Storyteller.
What?
So much better.
This. I think I would put it probably between the Passenger and the Storyteller at this point.
Steven went one lower. He went below Babel. But we'll put it between the Passenger and the Storyteller.
Babel. Yeah. Look, it's better than Babel.
Hurts my heart, Keith. I was more accepting of you bumping the other one up a couple spots than I am you knocking this down to 5th place. And I had it in number 1. Oh well. It's fine. I lost. We're good.
No. The analogy falls apart in the sense that there isn't a compelling enough reason to not just say, okay, that's great, let's go, because
See, I disagree, but Steven and I also talked about the amount of hours I've spent with Deep Space Nine, thinking about Deep Space Nine, the amount of books I've read about the rebellion and all the occupation and all that stuff. I feel like I'm in deeper emotionally than somebody that's watched 14 episodes of the show.
to like a space of 9, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. But you know what I mean. Like, yeah. I think there's...
This is why you guys don't understand the Cloud Minders from TOS.
We've only seen it once. We haven't seen it 50,000 times, right? So
that's a false construct.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?